All right, I think we're at a good starting point. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to P&P Live. My name is Brandy, and I'm a bookseller with the Children and Teens Department. Thank you for joining us today in this virtual format. We are so excited to welcome author Terry Catasús Jennings here today to tell us more about her early reader chapter book series, definitely Dominguita, including her first book, Knight of the Cape, and the newly released sequel, Captain Dom's Treasure. Terry Catasús Jennings immigrated to the US from Cuba on September 11th, 1961, and she was enrolled in American school the very next day. 12-year-old Terry could count in English and recite the days of the week and the months of the year, but not much more. She was often the only Cuban in her school and has used her experiences to portray Dominguita for this new series. She's a graduate of the University of Richmond, an essayist and humorist, and a writer of nonfiction for children. A local author, Terry lives in Reston, Virginia. For today's event, you can ask the author a question by clicking on the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Teachers, if you're sharing your screens and typing in student questions, please note the child's first name, grade, and school for us so we can acknowledge them. You can also vote on your favorite questions related to the favorite questions too by clicking the thumbs up button. Don't forget to have the questions relate to the book, author, or the topics we cover today. We'll also be asking you a question via an on-screen poll later in the presentation, and we hope that you'll participate by selecting your response. Finally, unlike what you may be used to in virtual school, you will not be visible to the other viewers. So it's just going to be myself and the author on the screen. You can click in the chat to get your own copy of Definitely Dominguita, Knight of the Cape, and Captain Dom's Treasure. This book makes a great gift for that special child in your life. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Terry. Terry, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandy. Hello, friends. How's everybody doing this morning? Yes, my name is Terry Catasús Jennings, and I am so happy to be here to share my Definitely Dominguita books. And let me show you who's here with me. Dominguita. She's my favorite doll. She's my favorite character. And we're also going to talk about writing a series of books. Now, this series is about a Cuban American third grader who loves to read and she loves to pretend. So let's get started by reading the first few pages of Dominguita so you can see how she gets in trouble. All Dominguita Melendez wanted to do today was read. It didn't look like she would be able to do it though. Not with Ernie Bublassi heading her way. Cranky Pants wants her to join the game, he said. Why couldn't Mrs. Knerpen leave her alone? And why had she sent the biggest jerk in her grade to find her? She said someone needed to look for you, and I volunteered, Ernie said. Great. Now he was reading her mind. She wants you to come play dodgeball. Ugh. Dominguita slammed her book shut. Ernie shrugged. Everybody knows you read because you don't have any friends. Huh? I do so have friends. Dominguita's fist clenched. Who? She wanted to tell Ernie Bublassi the names of all her friends. But since Miranda had moved to Pascagoula in second grade, she hadn't taken the time to find any new friends. She'd been reading too much. I don't need friends, she said, even though she still missed Miranda. I am studying to be a knight. The minute she said it, she knew she was in trouble, big trouble, because Ernie Bublassi knew how to make her mad and angry and furious. He grabbed her book. Knights? You studying to be a knight? Girls can't be knights. I never heard of a girl being a knight. Dominguita would gladly have told him about Joan of Arc. She was a knight, right? There must have been others, Dominguita was sure, but there was only one thing on her mind that very minute. Give it back. That's my grandmother's book. You studying to be an old lady knight? Ernie Blasi threw the book in the playground. Dirt, you'll never be a knight. I can too be a knight. I'll show you. Blasi wasn't through with her. Hey guys, he yelled as they reached the dodgeball game. Dominguita's gonna be a knight. She's studying for it, a girl knight, as if she wasn't weird enough already. Right? So you can see how she gets in trouble. And you heard she was reading her Abuela's book. But what you didn't hear is why she was reading that old book to begin with. You know, Dominguita was reading a famous old book written long, long ago, about 500 years ago. But Abuela read it to her for bedtime stories. And she read her versions, you know, kid versions. And she read them because Abuela was from Cuba, and Abuela brought those books with her from Cuba. And they meant a lot to Abuela. And it was a way to connect with Dom. Reading books as bedtime stories and reading these famous old books was a way that they connected. So it was a way of being close. But now Abuela has had to move because Abuela's getting forgetful, and Dominguita's mommy and papi are getting, you know, they're a little afraid that Abuela's is gonna have problems if she's in the house all by herself while Dominguita is in school and they're at work. So now that Abuela left, reading her books is the way that Dom keeps that closeness. Do you have someone in your life that's like that you're really close to? You know, like maybe you and your mom love baseball and you watch baseball games together, or maybe you have an uncle that loves rock music like you do. So yeah, so if you do have something like that, you understand how Dominguita felt and how it meant a lot to her to be close to her Abuela. But you know, when Ernie Blasi challenged Dom to be a knight, that was perfect because Dom loves to pretend. But even better, she decided to ask her brother to write a book with the selfies that she takes and stories of Dom's adventure, so Ernie will believe that Dom did them. And that book will also be good for helping Abuela feel connected to Dom and to her brother. So the idea of pretending to be a character in a famous book and her brother writing a book about her adventures is the theme of the series. It goes from book to book to book. It keeps the series together. So let me show you really quick. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Play from current slide. There we go. It's always wonderful when the technology works. Okay. So here's the book that Dominguita was reading. Don Quixote is about an old man that does nothing but read, and people tell him you shouldn't be reading. And then all of a sudden he decides he's going to be a knight, and someone writes a book about him. You see how it kind of is the same way that Dominguita was? And in the book, there's the setup. So the setup in the first book is that Dominguita is reading this book, and Ernie Blasi challenges her to be a knight. Then what Dominguita does is that she goes to see El Señor Fuentes, who is a junk store owner, and she borrows things from his junk store. She borrows a painting bucket to make a pail out of it. She borrows one of those doors that you put in your garage for your cat or your dog to come in and out of the house. She borrows one of those for her breastplate. She makes a lens out of a closet pole and a turkey baster. She tapes that around with with duct tape. So she's got her equipment from her Señor Fuentes. Knights often will go to a castle, and the castle owner, the Castellan, will give them free food. Well, so Dominguita goes to a restaurant, to a Senor Prieto's restaurant, Yuca Yuca, and expects for him to give her food, and actually he does. And she does work for it eventually. But anyway, Senor Prieto says, hey, here's my nephew Pancho. Why don't you let him be your squire? And Dominguita couldn't turn him down because here Senor Prieto was being nice to her, and Pancho didn't have anything else to do. He was in her grade, and so there you go. Now she has a squire. And then she gets herself dubbed a knight by Mr. Kowalski at the grocery store. And then she has adventures. One of the adventures that she has is that she and Pancho rescue a girl from a bully. And this girl's name is Steph. And they rescue her from the bully. And at the end of the book, the three of them decide that they really enjoyed playing, pretending to be characters in Don Quixote, and maybe they should try a new book. So they decide to try Treasure Island. And that's the other book that Brandy showed you, Captain Don's Treasure. Now the setup here is that Dominguita goes to the library to see Mrs. Booker, and Mrs. Booker gives her this old book because all the other books are checked out. She gives her this old book that's in the basement in the stacks. And Dom opens it, and out falls a real map with X's and notes and pictures. And she has to figure out. She has to figure out what the treasure is. She has to figure out where the treasure is, and she has to find it. And someone else wants to find that treasure. So that's where the problem comes. And she gets her equipment from a Senor Fuentes like she did before, and then she has her adventures. And you can see that because there was a mini poo-poo head that also wants to get the treasure, they're not as happy in this book as they were before. So they have lots and lots of adventures. So in each book, we have the same thing, the setup, getting the equipment, and having the adventures. In this one, All for One, they become musketeers. And in this one, Sherlock Dom, I bet some of you can know what that one's all about. They become detectives. So, you know, Dominguita's a series like a lot of other series you've already seen, right? Like Judy Moody, like Yasmin, Beep and Bop, Stella Diaz, Freddie Ramos, all those series, they do the same thing. They have the same characters having different adventures in different books. Series books are different from what I call only books. Only books have no siblings. So here we go. These guys, they're siblings. They come from the same series. Only books are only one. Series have brothers and sisters. Series have the same characters, pretty much the same place. Sometimes in these books, sometimes we even have the same villains. So now we're going to take a poll, because I'm thinking that what you're thinking is, you know, when you have the same characters, you have the same setting, same place, some of the same villains, it's easier to write a series. Let's see, while I stop sharing, you guys are going to take a poll. Let's see what you think. All right. Let's see what you guys think. Okay, 15 seconds. I can't wait to see what you think. This is a very serious question, you know. Okay, well, 46% think that it's easier to write a series, and 54% think it's easier to write an only book. All right. Okay, well, let's see. I'm going to tell you what it takes to write a series, and you will take another poll and see what you guys think. All right. So to me, remembering, when you're writing a series, remembering is a problem, because you may not read right away, you know? You may pick up this book in the library today and wait 3 weeks and read this one. Or, you know, my third book, the one all-in-one, the one about the Musketeers, is not coming out till August. So you won't remember everything about the book. The other thing is that I won't remember everything about the book as I'm writing them, because I don't write them one right after the other. So maybe I don't remember. So I've got to remember things like whether El Señor Fuentes, who owns a junkyard, remember whether he has brown eyes or whether he has blue eyes. It turns out that El Señor Fuentes has both. He has one brown eye and one blue eye. Now, we guys are all from Washington. We all know the Nationals, Max Scherzer, the pitcher for the Nationals, he has one brown eye and one blue eye. So I modeled El Señor Fuentes after him. You saw El Señor Prieto, who owns a restaurant, right? Yuca Yuca. He was bald in that slide. It would be very embarrassing for him to be bald in book 1 and to sprout a full head of curly hair in book 4. Okay, can't happen. So here's what I have to have. I have to have a cheat sheet. Can you guys see that? It's right side up. Yeah, it tells me what everybody looks like. It tells me who everybody is. And that's several pages long. And I have that, and the publishers have that, so that we're consistent. So we're able to write the same thing in the book, from book to book to book. So maybe some of you guys gives you a little bit of food for thought there. And there's another problem. Don't think that's the only one. In an only book, I only have to tell you what a person looks like once and what the place looks like once. In a series, in book 1, I'll tell you about El Señor Fuentes' eyes, okay? And then when I get to book 2, I have to tell you again, right? But I have to tell you in a different way, because otherwise it'd be kind of boring, right? So let me show you how I did it. In book 1, I said El Señor Fuentes' eyes settled on Dom. The right eye was blue and the left one was brown. Okay, now when we get to book 2, I say the eyebrow over his blue eye rose, working on the problem. The eyebrow over the brown eye, it had the day off. Okay, so you see how it's a different way of saying it. And I do that with every single character. And I do that book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4. And if I get to write book 8, I'll be doing it in book 8. In an only book, that would be like in chapter 15, describing everything and everyone all over again. Getting to chapter 29 and describing everything and everyone all over again. So food for thought, right? Is it harder to write a series or harder to write an only book? Another one of the things that I have to remind you of, if you're just picking up the book or if it's been a while, is why that person is important. We said that Rafi, Dom's brother, writes the book. So, the book for Abuela. And so we know whenever Rafi shows up that he's the writer and that he's putting a book together. So it's important to tell him things, to call him every day and tell him what's going on, or to, have a meeting with him every day. In book 2, Dom does something very, very nice. Book 2 is centered around the fact that Dom is doing something for Mr. Kowalski. But why is she doing something for Mr. Kowalski? Because in book 1, Mr. Kowalski dubbed her a knight. So that's why we need to know why the people are important. And again, even if I write book 8, I'm going to have to let you know why each one of those characters is important. Now, another thing that you guys are, this just goes without saying, really, is the relationship between the kids needs to be the same. Because, you know, like Brandy's personality is not going to change. Your personality is not going to change from week to week or month to month. Dom is always the one who charges ahead and she makes the decisions. Sometimes she makes decisions even if they're wrong. Now, Pancho, he's always the one that says, wait a minute, Dom, hang on. We got to think about this. Sometimes Pancho's not willing to make a decision, okay? Now, Steph, she's always saying, you think we'll get in trouble? What if he gets his feelings hurt? Now, you know, I don't want you to think that Steph is a wuss, because she's not. She's a strong girl. But she likes to follow rules. And, you know, sometimes that's important. In any problem, you're going to need somebody who charges ahead, or maybe you need somebody who thinks things through, or maybe you need somebody who follows the rules, or maybe you need somebody that bends them. So depending on the problem, you're going to need all those things. And each problem needs that. They need that type of character, personality coming to the problem. So the characters bring that to try to solve the problem. But the right character has to bring it, right? I can't have Dom be the charger in the first problem and be the, oh no, we have to think about this in book 2. It has to, their personalities have to be the same. So, you thinking some of you guys changing your mind? Okay, here's another problem. And it's the wheres. Not where everything is, okay? But like, if Dom is going from her house to the library, she turned right in book 1. So in book 2, 3, and 4, if she's going to the library from her house, she needs to take a right. In every book, if in book 1, I say that Steph lives 2 blocks from Monroe Park, which she does. In book 3, I can't say that it took her an hour to walk home from Monroe Park, unless I say that she stopped to have ice cream, or that she met Steph and Dom, Pancho and Dom and Rocco the dog, and they had, you know, they played Frisbee. There's got to be a reason why it would take an hour to walk 2 blocks. If they're going from Kowalski to Yucca Yucca, it's 6 blocks every time. All right, so how do I keep that consistent? How did I keep that the same? Well, I have a map. I have a map that I make, and this is in my computer, and I can refer to it all the time. Because, you know, for me, having pages laying around on my desk is awful, because my desk is the dirtiest, awfulest thing in the whole world. So I have to have my computer. But, you know, so here's Dom's house. Here's Yucca Yucca. Here is Mr. Kowalski's grocery. So all this stuff, here's what Steph lives. So I know I can walk through Mundytown, the name of the town, to show you how, to tell you correctly which way they're going. Now, there's one last thing that I need to talk to you about, and that is the voice. And I want you to think about this. The voice is not the sound that comes out of your mouth. The voice is how Dom talks when she's telling the story. It shows us her personality. When she was saying, great, now he's reading her mind, that was her personality. And that has to be the same from book to book to book, how she's telling us a story. And sometimes it was a year, honest to goodness, from when I wrote this book to when I wrote book 3. So it's difficult for me to really get into that frame of mind to know exactly how Dominguita sounds. So what I do, and if I could see you guys, I would be asking you this, but I want you to think about it. What would be a good way for me to think of, to get back into the series? And I bet you one of the things you're going to say is that I'm going to reread the book. And that's the truth. I reread them every time. Reread. And more than once, both books, 3 books, just so that I can get how she thinks. But I do another thing. I retype. So I'll open my book and I'll start reading and I'll type. And I'll read and I'll type. And I'll read and I'll type. And I read and I'll type and I'll type and I'll type. And when I get to the point that my fingers are going, that they know that I know how Dominguita would do the next thing in that scene, how I know how she's going to talk, when I know what she's going to do, I'm in her head. I know at that point that I'm in her head and she is in my head. Okay. Well, I think it's time for us to take another poll and see how many people think that we can, that it's easier to write a series than an only book. Let's see what you guys think. I'm excited to know. I want to see if I convinced you, but you don't even know which way I wanted you to think. So, well, maybe you do. Maybe I gave myself away. And I love that there's a lot of Q&As already. 15 more seconds, guys. Okay. I didn't convince you guys that it's easier to write a series. Some people, some people think that it's easier. I did convince some of you. Some people think that it's easier to write an only book. And that's exactly the way that I feel. But you know what? I don't care if it's harder because I love writing a series. And you know why? Because writing a series, I get to be with those characters for a long, long time. I don't have to say goodbye to them. I don't have to act like they moved to another town. And yeah, I'll go visit them every once in a while, but you know, I don't get to see with them every day. I get to be with them every day for days and days and days. And maybe I'll get to write even more books because I have many, many more ideas that I want them to go on, many more adventures that I want them to go on. So we are at the end of our presentation. So I hope you guys, I hope you'll read definitely Dominguita, but I hope you guys might think about reading some of the kids' versions of the classics, like the Three Musketeers or Treasure Island. That would be awesome. And now, Miss Brandy, you're on.
All right. Thank you so much, Terry. That was a great presentation. And I know we're all even more excited to read your books now that we've heard about your process and where the characters came from. So I have some great questions queued up here. I'm just going to start with Bismighty, who is a 4th grader at Bernard Elementary School, and they would like to know, how did you come up with all the characters? And the whole class wants to know, are they inspired by anyone in your life?
Oh my gosh, that's the best question ever, because yes, they're inspired by people in my life. Absolutely. So I came up with Dom. She kind of came into my head all of a sudden one day when I was out reading, but she came as a boy. And my daughter told me, she said, Mom, you can't have a boy, it's gotta be a girl. And of course it had to be a girl. And so the boy's name was Don Quijote, and I wanted it to be kind of like Don Quijote sounded kind of good. So Dom is short for Dominguita, so that's how she came. Pancho Sanchez, Don Quixote had a squire named Sancho Panza, and so her squire needed to be Pancho Sanchez. So that came really well. And, Steph just came out of the blue. We had to we rescued a bully, and she wanted to be part of the group. And it took them a little while to accept her, but she did accept her. So that's where they came from. Now, the real person that they're based on, and you might be able to tell that this person right here is a little the kind of person that just barrels on and doesn't think about decisions and just, make many decisions, even if they're wrong. My husband, on the other hand, he's the, wait a minute, we have to think about this. And then my best friend, Kathy, is just like Steph. Kathy always wants to, she's an awesome person and I love her forever and ever. And she's a strong girl, but she always wants to follow the rules. And she always has to make sure that everybody's feeling good. And there's a place for all of that in the universe. So great question, thanks.
Wonderful. Tell us a little bit about your experience coming to America from Cuba as a girl and not speaking English. What was that experience like?
It was scary like anything, because here I was, there was all these kids speaking in English and I knew absolutely nothing. And so it was hard. But that's what I tried to do the best, because I was 12 years old and I didn't want to be different. And so I tried to learn English as quickly as I possibly could and have as little accent as I possibly could. But it was very scary because I always thought that people were talking about me. And of course, I didn't understand. The only class that I did well in was math, because, math translates, without translation, without words. And it actually happened that in Cuba, we were a little bit ahead of the math that I was doing in 7th grade here. So I did fine. I did fine in math, but everything else was pretty awful. I had a friend, a person who spoke a little bit of Spanish for about 2 months, and then we moved, and I was the only kid in my school that that was Cuban. But I did okay. It didn't take me all that long to learn. Thank you.
Well, let's see. Serena has a question. Does the book have Spanish words, and how often do you include cultural elements in the stories?
Yes, the book has a lot of Spanish words, and most of them are food words. Because the kids love food, and I try to use food as a way of showing, hey, this food is different. This food may not look like the food that you normally eat, but hey, try it, you'll like it. And by saying that, I'm also saying, hey, these kids are Cuban. They may not look exactly the way you are, but try them. You'll like them as friends. So that's what I'm trying to say. Of course, the word abuela is in there, and mommy and papi, and stuff like that. The cultural elements that I use are, of course, the food, but also the way Abuela behaves, because as a Cuban, she has a great deal of honor, and that's and I think that goes along with a lot of Latin cultures, a lot of dignity, a lot of honor, and I try to bring that out in the books. But on the other hand, I try to make Dom is a regular kid, just like everybody here.
Great. Let's see. Kamora, who is a 4th grader at Bernard Elementary School, would like to know whether it is hard to write a book and what challenges do you come across?
Sometimes it's hard. Yeah. These books were not hard to write, because the minute Dominguita came around, in my head, I started thinking, and these kids were fun. So these books were not hard to make. But I started writing a book about when I was in Cuba. I was in Cuba till I was 12, and my dad was put in jail before we left. And that was very difficult. And I wrote a book about that, and I rewrote it, and I rewrote it, and I rewrote it. And I started writing that book in 2008. And finally, it went out into the world to see if anybody would, any publishers would want to publish it and make it into a book. And about 2017 or 2018, and nobody liked it. So that's one of the challenges, is that you write a lot and you write something and you actually think it's wonderful. And I have an agent, I have a person who speaks for me, and she's kind of like my teacher, and she helps me get the book to be the best that it possibly can be. But she, neither one of us, we both thought that the book was wonderful, but nobody else did. So between 2019 and now, I have rewritten that book again. So some of the challenges are that you can't know what people like, what people are, whether you've hit the right note. Having said that, when I did Dominguita, I had a feeling that this was going to be one that people would really like, and it turns out that it's been well liked, and I hope you'll see a lot more of her.
You definitely hit the right note with this one for sure. Daisy would like to know who did the illustrations, and did you work with them to create the way that the characters looked?
Oh my goodness. So Fatima Anaya, she's from El Salvador. She did the illustrations. And the truth of the matter is that most of the time, I would say 90% of the times, and in other books that I have done, I have never worked with the illustrator in person, directly, person to person. So I have to tell, so she sends her sketches, she reads my book, and somebody tells her, yeah, we want to highlight this scene, we want to highlight that scene. Let me show you. I mean, there's a lot of pretty illustrations in here, cute things that she did. And they're beautiful, and I love the covers. She's done a beautiful, beautiful job. But she sends them to somebody at the publishers, then that person looks at them and says, yeah, this is right, this isn't right, and then they send it to me. And I say, yeah, this goes along with the text, this doesn't go along with the text. And when I saw my first cover, I cried because it was so good, because she got Dominguita. And that very first scene, the one where she's reading and she's alone and everybody's playing around her, she got Dominguita. She knows exactly what it is, but she got her all by herself. I had nothing to do with it, which is wonderful, because you got to think you're bringing two intelligences together. Her intelligence as an artist and my intelligence as a writer, and you're bringing them together. So what you're doing is bound to be better.
Well, you definitely created characters that makes it easy to interpret them into art, because they're so well developed. So
thanks.
So Ruth, who is a fourth grader at Bernard, wants to know, how do you brainstorm or develop your ideas? And do you just sit down and start writing, or is there a process before that?
Okay, in this particular series, the way I did it was I reread the old books. I reread the famous books. And so I wrote down how they acted, words that they said, sayings that they had, how they acted with each other, like Long John Silver in Captain Dom's, in Treasure Island. He's a charmer. He wants everybody to think he's wonderful, but then he stabs him in the back. So the meanie poo-poo head in Captain Dom's Treasure is exactly like that. And then I pick out the scenes that people know about from the famous book, like Don Quixote tilted at a windmill. So Dom tilts at a windmill. And then I write a totally different book, but I have that to guide me. I start writing, I write a couple of chapters, kind of just going. Once I get started on the first chapter, once I get started on the first few words, and I have the first two, just coming up with the first few words, that just gets me going. And then I write the first 2-3 chapters, and then I sit down and outline, and I say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. In a book, an only book, and I have written many only books, and I hope that you'll get to see some of them. Actually, you will get to see one of them in 2022, and I hope you'll get to see more of those only books. But in an only book, I I have an idea of what this character, always come up with the character first. That's what gets me. Always come up with the first few paragraphs first. And then I know, okay, I want this character to get from here, and this is what's going to happen in the end. Like I have one who is wants to have a Scotty dog. She wants to have a Scotty dog. So in the end, she has to have, not giving anything away, you're going to figure out that she's going to get a Scotty dog. But in the middle, what's going to happen? So I do brainstorm about that. And I am an outliner, not, very, very, beautiful, pretty outlines, but they're outlines.
Excellent. So all you aspiring writers out there, listen up. You're getting some great advice today from an expert. Kamari, who is a fourth grader at Bernard, would like to know, how do you know when or if your book is good? When it is done?
Oh, goodness. Okay, so you know that you got to the end when you got to the end. But when you know whether it's good, you have to reread and reread and reread. And when you reread it and you don't make too many more changes, then you kind of know that it's as good as you can make it. Unfortunately, that doesn't always mean that it's good, because somebody may not like it. I've gotten to that point, like I told you, and that hasn't always happened. So, but you have to just keep going. You have to revise many, many times. Mm-hmm. And then you're lucky when you get an editor, when somebody publishes it and you get an editor, and she tells you, hey, you got to change this and you got to change that. We had to change the ending to Captain Dom, totally. So, yeah, so I thought it was great, but she didn't.
Mm. Do you feel did you make any mistakes in the writing of this book?
In the writing of Dom, I sure did. And it was very embarrassing. There's Don Quixote finds his helmet, and it's called, in the book, I called it the golden helmet of Membredo. And the illustrator was having a hard time. And so I went online and I said, come on, I'm going to look for the golden helmet of Membredo. Well, it turns out it's not the golden helmet of Membredo, it's a golden helmet of Mambrino. But Membredo is a dessert that my dad had every day of the week. And so it's a sweet dessert. And it was in my head, so I didn't have to really think about it. I'm a nonfiction person. I wrote a lot of nonfiction. Why didn't I check that? Because I knew for sure that was the name of the thing. So it was very embarrassing to have to tell my editor, hey, and this was at the end, I mean, we were ready to go with the book. So what we did was, Dom makes that same mistake. She calls it Membrillo because her abuela eats Membrillo for dessert. And Pancho says, come on, it's not Membrillo, it's Mambrino. So, yeah.
Well, that's so great. So you turned your mistake into a moment, kind of a fun moment in your book.
Exactly.
I love that. Just a few more questions. We have, I think it's Cleisha, a fourth grader at Bernard, wants to know what motivates you to write. And you said in school that you loved math, but now you are writing. And so what is that? What kind of made you go in that direction?
Well, I'm good in math, but I love writing. And I have a lot of ideas always rolling around in my head. And I didn't start till late because, being an immigrant, writing is not a good career for an immigrant child. And, my parents said, you really need to have a career that, mm-hmm. That you can depend on. And I had, I had a teacher that pushed me away from writing, and that was, I wasn't, I just said, okay, I'm going to do math, and that's the way it is. But eventually, when I was old, I started writing again because stories are always rolling around in my head, and I have to get them out. I was very happy when I started letting them out.
Emily, who is a fourth grader at Bernard, asks, what was the first book that you ever wrote?
Well, the first book that I ever wrote is called The Last Bird of Summer, but it hasn't ever been published. The first book that I ever published is called Gopher to the Rescue, a Volcano Recovery Story. And it's the story about the recovery after the Mount St. Helens volcano erupted. So, yeah, it's, thanks for asking that. And yeah, and I've written many nonfiction and creative nonfiction books, and even some of them that, they're not under my name. They're inside books and all that kind of, I'm just part of many people that wrote a particular book. But yeah, Gopher to the Rescue is the first one that that was published.
All right, we'll have to check that out. Just two more questions. Miss Calcagno, who a fourth grader at Bernard Elementary School, asks, do you have a designated space where you do your writing, and where's your favorite space to write?
My favorite space to write is where I can look out the window and be close to the outdoors. And it doesn't really matter where it is. And like I said, I'm a very messy person. So if I get to any desk, it ends up being a mess, and then I have a hard time cleaning it up. So I'll just sit where the kitchen counter is often good, or I have one of these little platforms that get suction cupped into a sliding glass door, so I can be right there, out there looking at the trees and being outside and seeing the birds while I'm doing things. And I work standing up because I have to pace. And so, yeah, pacing, and I do a lot of trips to the refrigerator and to the pantry while I'm writing.
Well, I know about pacing. If you guys can see, my dog has been pacing back and forth. So we do a lot of pacing in this household too. One last question from Sloan, who is a third grader at the River School. They would like to know how it felt to bring your characters to life.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was wonderful when it started working. When it started working, when you see that, that here you have a viable character, that she has a good personality that you really like, because you have to like your characters to be able to continue writing them. But it was not just her, it was Pancho, and it was the relationship between her and Pancho. And then they brought in Steph. And it was another thing that I loved about this was the town. Mundy Town is a wonderful place where kids can go roam around, and the shopkeepers kind of take care of them. And these kids can't get in trouble because it's a town that cares. And that's the place that I grew up in Cuba. It was a place where, and that's not normal for a lot of kids. The place where I lived in Cuba, I had a lot of freedom. I walked myself to school. I walked myself to the park. I walked myself, and there was the grocery store that I went by. And so it was very much that I couldn't get in trouble because everybody knew my grandmother's name, my grandfather's name. I could not get in trouble. And that's the way this place is.
I love that. And just to clarify for a question I saw, so right now there are 2 books in the series that have been published. You can find them at the store. And then there's 2 more that are about to come out in the coming months, correct?
Right. August 18th is the All for One, which is probably the funniest. If you like the first 2, you're going to love All for One because it's the funniest. And Sherlock Dom, we just finished editing, and that. So it was supposed to come out in September, but now Amazon says that it's coming out in November. So I don't know who to believe, but I just do what I just go along. Yeah, so at least All for One is coming out in August, and that one is ready, and the artwork is ready, and Sherlock Dom is coming out sometime between September and November. But yeah, and I hope that there will be more. I'm thinking that if you guys like them, tell everybody. Say, hey, we want more Dominguita books.
All right, guys, you heard it straight from the author. So
that's right.
Tell all your friends they need to read these books. All right. Well, thank you so much to our viewers for those great questions. And I just want to thank Terry again for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, it was such fun.
Yes, it really was. You can always click the link in the chat to purchase your copy of Definitely Dominguita, the series. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. You can learn about other upcoming events in the Children and Teens Department on our website, which is politics-prose.com. Just click on the Children and Teens tab and then click events for a calendar of upcoming events. And we've got some really good ones, so we hope to see you here again. You can also view past events on our YouTube channel. And so when you tell your friends that they need to read these books, you can also direct them there and they can actually watch today's program on our YouTube channel so they can hear all the great behind the scenes information that we got today. So thank you again. We hope to see you again soon. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we'll see you